Welcome to Democracy. I am Fred Wellman, your host. We are coming to you back in the studio this week from the beating heart of America in St. Louis, Missouri, where it's pouring down rain. State of the Union address was last night, and every bit as insane as we all expected to be, with the Bark of the House throwing her feces all over the place as usual. We will be talking about that. Whole lot more with an amazing guest I've been trying to get on for a while, and he found time for us. So I'm thrilled to have him. So you know what? Let's just get on with the show. Welcome. As I mentioned, I am Fred Wellman, your host. This is On Democracy with FP Wellman. Glad to have you here. Thanks so much. This week's show comes with an extra serving of sauce on the side, so get that on the counter as you head out. Don't forget to pick us up on all your favorite podcast platforms. Just subscribe on YouTube. Matt is getting very fried. Look, Matt's getting mad, y'all. We're like 25 people away from 1,000. And Matt seems like a nice person, but he tortures me when I'm off screen here. We got to get to 1,000. So anyway, subscribe where you can. The Speaker of the House, we had a lot going on there. The State of the Union was one for the ages. Biden delivering, honestly, one of his finest speeches I've seen him give. I'm not going to lie to you. And I'm not one of those guys who gives out glowing reviews, but I thought it was a great speech. You know, you kind of really showed what it looks like when you've been in the Congress and the Senate for 50 years. You know some stuff, right? And it showed. Of course, the Speaker of the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene, wore her best Cruella de Vil outfit to badger the president. The guy she let sit in her chair, Kevin McCarthy, promised there wouldn't be any outburst. I actually bookmarked that tweet, and of course he came out false. It only took about 2 hours for him to be proven wrong. He's reduced to shushing people from the podium, and it didn't work. So, I have the privilege to meet our guest in our shared work taking on Donald Trump. I've been eager to have him on the show. Honestly, can't believe he joined me, and I'm glad he just doesn't know that I had this show for the only reason is to talk to guys like him, and that's it. So luckily he fell for my trips. Honestly, if you're listening to a political podcast and don't know who Bill Kristol is, I don't know what to tell you at this point. He's of course a freaking commentator on several networks, including CNN and many more. Founder and editor-at-large of the legendary conservative political magazine, The Weekly Standard. He's now editor-at-large of one of my favorite places, the growing online publication network, the Bulwark. In addition, he is founder and director of Defending Democracy Together, responsible for such efforts that I'm a fan of as Republicans for the Rule of Law, Republican Voters Against Trump, Republicans against Putin, all the things I'm against. I could read your whole Wikipedia page, Bill, but what's the point of that? We already know who you are. So, Bill Kristol, welcome to On Democracy. I'm glad to have you, brother.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for that very nice introduction. It's probably good you did not read the whole Wikipedia page. We would have lost. Yeah. We would never get to 1,000. You'd get to negative 1,000 listeners.
Yeah. No, I'm a professional podcaster. I read the blogs and stuff. They said don't do that. So, this is a professionally run show. I got a studio and everything. So, Bill, I really appreciate your time. I know you got 10,000 things going on. Honestly, it's hard to write a bio for you. It's like, well, what is he actually doing? All these things. So anyway, I think I told you when we started, I start every episode off, I ask guests, how'd they get here? Now, a lot of people know your story. Obviously, you're pretty famous. You've been around for a couple of days. But I am curious, when is it, I talk a lot about the moment I knew. The moment I knew was I liked people that weren't captured. That was the moment I knew, and not just Trumpism, but the party, when the next week, when so many in the party and so many of my fellow veterans, as a matter of fact, still supported this gentleman, I knew that I had lost my place in that world, right? That it was going in a direction. Do you ever think about what was that moment when, you saw Trump or whatever, that you kind of said, wait a minute, the things I've been supporting for so long may not fit anymore?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember that moment well, and I don't know that there's any one moment exactly, but that would be a pretty good candidate. He said that in Iowa.
Yep.
About John McCain.
Yep.
I think it was on a Friday or Saturday. It was Saturday morning, I think. My colleague Steve Hayes, then colleague at the Weekly Standard, was there actually, and sort of was involved in the back and forth with Trump on that. So I remember talking to Steve that day, and it got put up immediately online, obviously, and then I was on this week, the next morning with George Stephanopoulos. And I think maybe there was a guest host that day, but I remember it was in DC doing the show. And they came to me and I said, well, Trump's finished. I mean, you can't insult someone who fought for his country.
I think I saw you. I think I saw you.
Heroic POW. I mean, people may not love John McCain because of certain positions he's taken, but you can't say that. And of course, I was totally wrong. Yeah. And as I realized how wrong I was, I realized Trump was onto something, unfortunately, in a way, and I was not onto something in terms of where the party was willing to go.
Yep. It really struck me too. And I was a veterans advocate at the time. I'd been a veterans advocate for 10 years professionally. I had my own firm at the time. And I fully expected my peers, even Republican peers in the veterans community, there's just lines. You get it. There's lines you don't cross, and attacking our POWs, our MIA. Of course they're heroes. And he blew right through that and kept going, and they didn't run away. And I thought, wow. For me, it was even a bigger, because I wasn't a politics guy then, Bill. I was a advocacy guy, and even then I knew I was in trouble. I was like, wow. I mean, my peers who should be appalled aren't. And I talk the story. People probably who watch the show often know. It was just what a few weeks later, a few months later, that the Rolling Thunder ride in D.C. on Memorial Day. They stop at the end of the Lincoln Memorial, and they actually gave Trump a podium and let him speak. And the whole rally is supporting POWs and MIAs. And this guy who only a few months earlier said they weren't heroes got the speaking gig. And I was like, oh, shoot, man. I was like, I don't fit in anymore. So, yeah, that was it for me. Now, we're filming today, the day after the State of the Union speech. I don't even know where to start with that. But, actually, I had somewhat low expectations, to be honest with you. I didn't, not so much for Biden, but after having seen so many of these and of course the idiocy of last year, I kind of expected it to be a bit of a snooze fest. I mean, for some reason I thought they'd behave, and two, I thought it'd just be your standard speech, but it really didn't come out that way. And when, as you think about it now, you've had about, 20 hours, I suppose, to think about it. What struck you the most as you look at last night's events?
I don't know. I had a high discount value too for State of the Union addresses. I got to Washington in '85 and was in the education department for the first 2 years, working for Bill Bennett, became chief of staff there. And I remember how hard we tried to get one sentence into the State of the Union about our department or about our initiatives or something that we thought would, it was. And then when I worked for Vice President Quayle, when I was his chief of staff, I was obviously more in the White House, a little more central to the process. And I remember people calling me up whom I knew at that point in all the different agencies, can we get in a paragraph on this? And so it always became a kind of checklist, as you say, a snooze fest. Very few of them have had great historic significance. A few, Bush's access to people in 2002 and a few others. I'm not sure this one really had historic significance. That is, I'm not sure that people remember a lot of what Biden said, but I think to the degree that there were questions about how he would do versus the new Republican House, did he have an ability to kind of carry forth his message, at least in this one night? He answered those questions. I thought he did well. I'm a little under. I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. He showed vigor and energy. He has an interesting kind of populist economic message. We'll see how far he can take that. And that can be risky. There's parts of it can backfire too. They all sound good in the abstract. People shouldn't be charged. Why are they charging us these resort fees at hotels? Everyone's been annoyed by that. You and I probably checked into places that are not, as he said, resorts. And suddenly there's an extra $26.95 on the bill for what? I don't know, and you can't choose not to have it. I'm not using the gym here or something. But having said all that, is it really that big a deal? And how is he going to do it in practice? And are the hotel changes going to put it on your regular bill? There's a lot of practical questions about some of these initiatives, I would say. Does it add up to a coherent agenda? But no, I think he did well. But I don't think it was historically significant in that he didn't really articulate a big agenda. It was an attractive agenda of medium-sized items, I would say, mostly attractive. Which gets him through the next 2 years, I think. The funny thing is, I thought, and I'll stop going on, but I've been someone who's been dubious he should run for a second term. But I got to say, this was an agenda for the next 2 years. It wasn't an agenda for the next 6 years, I didn't think, though,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you're right. It was sort of a hodgepodge. It wasn't, there was a thematic of, finish the job.
That was it. I finished the job. But what does that really mean when you think about it? That's sort of, that implies you're sort of halfway through or 2/3 of the way through.
That's
and
exactly.
Which is fair enough. He did a lot in the last year, and I'm not at all begrudging him that. And I think he would be a very successful president, incidentally, if he served for another 2 years. But I do think the finish the job was a little bit of a funny choice of a theme. It certainly gets them through anyway, but people won't remember it. It gets them through the next days and weeks and months and gives them a pretty good launch to this year. Again, whether we're talking about it 3, 6, 9 months from now, and whether as opposed to talking about the economy as a whole or Ukraine or some issue we haven't even thought about yet, it's funny. I'll tell you when you and I were talking before we got on the air about foreign policy, which we're both interested in, and obviously Ukraine and other things. And I went back because I was thinking of writing something, and I looked at Bill Biden gave his first. It wasn't officially a State of the Union, but when he became president, he gave a speech, and I think it was April of 2021. That was his first big speech to Congress. It's not officially a State of the Union when you take over because it's too late. And Ukraine is not mentioned in that speech. And Russia is mentioned 3 times, twice, once in the context of we want to work with everyone, including Russia, on climate change, and twice in the context of Putin should stop messing in our elections. And then the next the first official State of the Union was March 1st of 2022. That was a week after the invasion. And remember, he led with Russia and Ukraine, very powerful and very well done. 10, 12 minutes of the speech, I guess. Really a strong statement of our determination to back Ukraine and not let Putin get away with this, what the implications of that would be. So that was sort of memorable. This one, foreign policy, receded a lot. It was mostly domestic policy and economic policy, which is fine. But it was striking to me that pretty big war going on in Ukraine and pretty important for the future of the world. I guess he just chose, he's talked about it elsewhere, he'll talk about it again. He just chose to emphasize domestic and economic policy in this speech, which is fine. I still think he sort of needs to remind the American people how much is at stake in Ukraine, though.
I agree. Now, before I get away from it, do you think perhaps a lot of this decision-making that went into this was the tactical aspects of it? In other words, knowing that what has become the House caucus of just nutters, let's be honest, the way they behaved last year, it felt like a lot of the speech was designed in many ways sort of goad them and even lead them into ambushes a little bit. Do you think there was more of a tactical aspect of what he was doing there? I mean, it felt like there were it didn't seem like a mistake to me, or that he was ad-libbing. He was prepared. He set up sort of the L-shaped ambush, they used to call it in the military, right? And let them walk into it. Of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene can't resist, Marjorie Taylor Greene is just, she can't resist bait, she's just all id and no thinking. Perhaps, do you think that was part of it, that there was more of a tactical aspect to this one? He wasn't looking for history as much as...
Yeah, I think he set that up nicely, and as you suggest, and I think he ends up in a position where he's the guy who's in favor of unity, as he said a few times.
Right.
And working together. And he was gracious with Kevin McCarthy at the beginning, and the kind of little joke, I look forward to working with you. Hope that doesn't hurt you with your supporters. But then he also gave a pretty partisan speech at times, pretty tough speech.
Very much.
It provoked the House Republicans on purpose, and then was able to kind of say, okay, fine, you're finally for Social Security and Medicare. Good. I'll take that for granted. So I thought from a sort of tactical political point of view, it was pretty effective. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of, almost immediately. And I'm one of those guys that has to think about stuff like, it's 3 years. And but even if I woke up today, I was like, yeah, I can see it. And there's some great, actually the Bulwark had some wonderful, several of your colleagues at the Bulwark wrote some great pieces today that were a wonderful analysis of that, that there was a tactical element to them. He did a masterful job of leading them where he wanted to go tactically. And again, the dance of who's in charge here, right? The dance of, the way he honored McCarthy, the way he honored, McConnell at the start of it, right? And there was a great analysis by one of your colleagues about how he's making it clear he's going to try for that unusual move of growing his coalition, right, and getting independents, Republicans, whereas Republicans have made a very conscious decision just to grow their base, right, and energize their base. And you did mention you had a great thread today, I thought, on Twitter talking about the foreign policy pieces of that. We focus a lot on the show about our democracy, but I do believe we're facing a sort of a global autocratic movement, right? It's clearly clear that the forces that seek to abandon our democracy here are tied to those abroad, from Putin's malign influence, but CPAC's a love affair with Orban, right? There's a global democratic movement we face. You had some really good points. I mean, what should Biden be worrying about with foreign affairs? You highlight some really cool examples: Iran, Ukraine. What's on the menu for us as this global democratic movement, and what should Biden be focusing on there?
Yeah, I didn't mention Iran, which I thought was unfortunate. He could have had a sense of tribute to the very brave demonstrators there. These are on my mind because I was in Germany myself about 3 weeks ago with a colleague and meeting with some people there from government, from think tanks, talking about urging them to do a little more to help Ukraine, reassuring them as much as I could that the U.S. would be there, and even though some people like Marjorie Taylor Greene want to pull the plug, they wouldn't be able to over the next 2 years. It's funny when you're in Europe, you see how much damage some of this stuff does abroad. Yeah. You and I know how it works. The president's the president. Democrats still control the Senate. There are enough Republicans in the House, I'm quite certain, for now, and I think for the foreseeable future, to support the funding. Presidents are in powerful positions. In any case, the House can't just unilaterally stop funding,
Yep.
So could try to, but it's very, very hard. So, but if you're abroad, you don't follow all these details, and you just hear Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then you see someone report that McCarthy says he's very close to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and suddenly you think, well, why should we go out on a limb for Ukraine if the U.S. is going to walk away? Right. Why should we go out on a limb and be tougher with the Iranian regime if the U.S. isn't doing much about it? And I think on the whole, I say this as someone who supports, I think I've been very pleased by Biden's foreign policy since Afghanistan. So for the last year, I think he's really come through in a very important way. As you say, it's both beating back the autocrats and, in the case of Putin, really brutal aggression against the neighboring country. But also, it's a big moment, I feel like, between Iran and Ukraine, and even some of the reports of dissension in China. It could be a big moment of after some regression in a way for the last 10, 15 years. That's that sense that, what, democracy is good and liberal democracy is good. In a weird way, Trump has been a wake-up call for us, I think, at home, but also abroad. It's not an accident, right, that Trump is pro-Putin abroad and authoritarian at home.
Right.
These things do go together in many ways. And he thinks Xi is great. He thinks North Korea, that's a real well-run place. Yep. And so I feel like on the center right and center left, there's a real sense of we've got to be for liberal democracy and the rule of law and freedom and decency at home, but also it matters what we put up with and don't put up with, what we try to stop and don't try to stop abroad. And so I think it's a big opportunity as well as a big threat. And I think Biden, on the whole, as I say, has done well with that. I kind of personally wish he had done a little more of that last night, but there are other venues in which he can make that case. And the most important thing, obviously, is the policies more than a few sentences and speeches.
Yeah, I agree, and it does harken back to what you said at the beginning of having been in the administration, trying to get your line in, right? There is, as it was an hour and a half, right? Yeah. I mean, I've been on that
side. How about the end? Did you watch at the end? I didn't, but I was so tired, But I guess he stayed. I saw him staying for
hour and 15.
I remember previous presidents doing that, but I guess he stayed for like an hour and 20 minutes or something.
Yeah, it took him an hour and 15, hour and 20 to get out of the building.
And he was sort of mic'd, right? I couldn't.
Yeah, he was mic'd.
Hear snippets. It seemed like.
Yeah, there's a great thread. One of the reporters kind of stuck with him the whole time and was talking about all the different nugs.
Yeah, I saw some of that. I mean, it was kind of fascinating, like an old school Paul, right?
Well, that's it. He's
members of Congress saying, "Hey, what about the water situation here?" And that was a Republican. And
a Republican in California, right?
It's a Republican member from California. And the question in the old days, Biden being responsive to that might have led to that member voting for, I don't know, against not raising the debt ceiling, something totally irresponsible. These days, the partisanship, the tribalism, the polarization is so great that this guy will have a cordial exchange with Biden. Biden will actually tell his secretary, I'm making this up, but his secretary of agriculture to get on the phone with him and see what we can do more, what the administration can do more to make sure farmers in California have the water they need. Will they get any reward for that? I don't know. It's so different than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, but it's nice to see, right? It's nice to see a retail politician. And, it's funny. Sometimes Biden's old schoolism kind of makes me crazy. Let's be honest, because I'm a fighter. I'm a Lincoln Project guy, right? It's like, let's fight. Let's cause, let's throw some bombs. But one of the reasons that guys like you and I came over and voted for Biden, I think, was that old school, right? That when we did do things like actually have conversations with the other party and try to accomplish things for them. And you notice that was a big theme in the speech, right? Like, hey, we're doing infrastructure in your district. You can show up.
You can vote against it, but then you'll still want to be there at the groundbreaking.
Right. Exactly. It was a great line. And it's true. And it does lead us to that. It leads us to what is that old school sort of thing, and seeing him do that in the retail politics. And again, it goes to that sort of another thing I talked about in the pre-show is what Huckabee Sanders came in and said, which was much more of a it's time for youth and we're going to fight the culture war, and then a lot of people are interpreting that sort of a quiet endorsement of Ron DeSantis' approach. I can't imagine a scenario where Ron DeSantis would go down that aisle having those conversations. I think Christina Pushaw would bundle him out the back door to avoid people, right? So you get to, Sarah Huckabee Sanders' rebuttal speech is just kind of a dog's breakfast, honestly, of right-wing dark web fever dreams, it seemed like to me. It seems that so many in this new MAGA GOP are obsessed with these fantasies, but how long? And I wonder how long can they run this out? It feels like the Democrats are finally coalescing to fight back effectively, right? Where does the culture war party go, right? At what point does this new MAGA GOP obsession, when does it run out, Bill? Where do they go from here?
I would have thought it had run out on January 6th, honestly.
One would think.
There would be a real rethinking by the party and Trump would be finished and people would realize the price you pay for this kind of demagoguery. That's not quite the culture war stuff, though it is partly, but it's more the kind of anti-democratic stuff, but it overlaps. And said, well, of course, Trump bounced back more or less, and Sarah Sanders is a good person to cite, and she worked for Trump.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think we can't be too confident that it's not still working well enough to give Republicans a chance to win in 24. They won the House this time. They underperformed a little bit, but it's not as if they got clobbered in the elections. If they just avoided the craziest election denial stuff, the Republicans on the whole did okay. They didn't do great. So I'm worried that, Democrats and people like us, frankly, who are just appalled by this and see how bad it is for the country. I mean, that's the thing I come back to always. I didn't watch Sarah Sanders' speech, but I skimmed the text. And I think literally the first sentence or something is, well, everything Joe Biden said was a lie or something like that. What you've just seen is a bunch of lies. I mean, really? The president of the United States? You're a governor of one state talking about the president of the United States, of the other party, admittedly. You don't begin by saying, I just want to say, first of all, that we're all Americans. I hope President Biden, succeeds in those things that he should succeed in, where he speaks for the country, and other things we're going to oppose him as a loyal opposition. Nothing, none of that. I mean, it's really, I find it's so bad for it's not just that people sometimes say, well, I'm like old school or something, so I'm offended by this style. It's all just style questions, and that's why people like you and me are against Trump and Trumpism. But it's bad for the country. I mean, it really is bad for the country. It leads citizens to distrust each other and then to ultimately despise each other. Makes it very hard to actually work together on the things that matter. It's leading the Republicans, some of them on Ukraine, for example, to abandon what a lot of them started off with a reasonable, okay, of course we're for Ukraine against Putin. And now a lot of them, because Biden is supplying, arms and money to Ukraine, they're gradually sliding. A few of them were just pro-Putin, but a lot of them are sliding towards being pro-Putin just because they hate Biden more than they want to stand with Biden against Putin. That's really bad, for the country.
Right?
I think we saw that with Sarah Sanders.
Yeah. Well, essentially choosing our enemies. I think you saw that with I think we see that dynamic with the whole thing. You see it a lot. You see it with Tom Cotton a lot, and I know you got family there. You see it a lot with you see it with the balloon, the Chinese balloon, right, where they're almost rooting for the enemy in some ways,
right?
And for us, I mean, I'm a Reagan guy, right? I mean, I was a kid. I'm 57. I went to West Point during the Reagan administration. I was one of those guys, right? And there was that, as cheesy as it sounds, there was that upward, the belief that there could be better, that there was a certain je ne sais quoi, right, of our party at that time, right? The Republican Party was the adults in the room. They did believe in this society. We live in a society, if you will, which is a kind of a meme now, but we definitely just don't see that now. We see barking monkeys,
And most Democrats, they opposed Reagan pretty strenuously. I came to Washington in '85, a little older than you, but to work in the Reagan administration, and we were pretty annoyed at the Democrats a fair amount of the time. But at the end of the day, on the big things, there was a certain commonality, or at least respectfulness, in terms of the big issues and treatment of other people. Reagan and Bush embodied that. But to be fair, so did George Mitchell in the Senate, or Tip O'Neill in the House. Yeah. And I think that went on. I mean, changed a little with Newt. It kind of gradually started to change in the 90s. But Newt and Clinton still worked together on a lot of things. And Bush, I think, tried to work with the Democrats in Congress. It's hard to know exactly when it all went off the rails. It sort of got worse and worse, I think you could say, more partisan and more partisan. But then with Trump, we really went to a whole new level of bitterness, demagoguery, personal assaults. I remember the first time Trump said, I think he was already president, saying what the Democrats are saying is treason. And I remember thinking, treason? I'd never heard a major politician say that in either. I was too young for Joe McCarthy, So in either party, I mean, and it was about something, incidentally, that was just a normal policy disagreement.
Right. It was just a disagreement.
And it was so, I remember being so shocked and thinking, well, Republicans aren't going to put up with that. But of course, just like with the John McCain thing, they put up with everything. And that's really the tragedy. I mean, Trump by himself could have done some damage to the country, one-term president, but it would have been manageable if the whole party hadn't gone with him. And that's why your original point is a good one, Fred. I mean, it was the reaction to Trump saying what he said about McCain that was most telling, in a way more important than what Trump said about McCain.
Right.
Then the failure to react, the failure to hold him accountable was a real tip-off. I even underestimated a little bit at first how much it would be a tip-off for everything that happened in the next 4 years, but sort of the next 6 years, unfortunately.
And going,
and it's not clear it stopped happening either, you know?
No, and it gets to me a lot when people ask me a lot, so, well, why didn't you stay with the Republican Party? Why'd you leave completely? Why'd you become a Democrat? Which I am. Apparently I'm a liberal. I've been a bleeding heart liberal all along, according to my ex-wife. But having said that, there's no home right there's so many people have given away the values that they supposedly stood for. I talk a lot about a guy in this show. I hope he doesn't listen, but Rob Whitman. I used to live in Virginia 1, right? And Rob, I was a veterans advocate at the time. I was on the Veterans Council of Fredericksburg, Virginia. Rob got into that seat because I think somebody left, and he jumped in. And he was he's a lovely, wonderful retail politician. I tell a story of this is retail politics. You'll appreciate this. I remember rolling up. I was on his Veterans Council, and I'd bumped him a number of times. He'd visited my ex-wife's business, but I remember rolling up to the Chamber of Commerce Awards night one night. Bill, Rob rolls up in his beat up Toyota, of course, got to have that style. He jumps out of his beat up Toyota. He's putting his suit jacket on. He runs into me, literally, as I'm getting in my car. He goes, "Fred Wellman, oh man, I was just up at your alma mater. That new building there, the new dorms they're building are amazing at West Point, and you should be so proud of what they're doing." I'm like, literally that fast, Bill. He's just a terrific retail politician with a brain. And I had such expectations that when the Trump came in, and then within months he was one of the guys that tried to sneak into the skiff, because remember that episode. It's almost quaint now, right? And Rob's just gone over. And so as I watched so many people who I thought would hold the line, who would stick to their moral compass and not give into this, gave in, it made me realize there just simply wasn't a home, and there was no more fighting it, that too many had given in, and it's tough to watch. Now on that,
hopefully the party at some point will come back. It'd be good to have two healthy parties, but I'm with you. At this point, I have no real hopes in the short, medium term for the Republicans. Look, if they behave better rather than worse, that's good for the country. I hope McConnell holds them on Ukraine. I hope Mike Gallagher and some people hang tough on that. It's important for the country. Then I'm happy to help to the degree I can, which is not much, since they're not very fond of me as they are to you.
Not anymore.
But the Democrats, on the other hand, whom everyone was warning, oh my God, they got so far left, they're crazy. I've got to say, there are problems out there in the culture with the left, I would say, at universities and so forth.
Yeah.
But the actual Biden administration, the actual Democrats in Congress are mostly pretty reasonable. I don't agree with them on everything, but the two parties are not comparable.
Well, I think J.B. Last said it really well. I think it was J.B. Last today in his piece about Huckabee Sanders' speech. He said what she was attacking was some libs on Twitter. It wasn't actually Joe Biden, right? All the things
she was not full of woke orthodoxy
or governing
or obsessing about woke causes. It was a pretty standard. You might be, from you and me, a little bit too big government liberal, whatever, throwing money at everything. But it was standard Democratic New Deal kind of Great Society Democratic Party. And as I say, on foreign policy in particular, he's been pretty good. More of the kind of Hubert Humphrey Democrats.
That's actually the complaint in the left, right? The complaint in the left is that he's still foreign policy is quite centrist. And
so you went to West Point. You graduated from West Point when?
1987.
So you were a year after Mike Pompeo?
Yes, sir, I was. I did not, thankfully. I knew of him because he was this number one in his class. I don't think he was first captain, but I have great disdain for him, right? I literally have you'll laugh in my script, but so those are the behind the scenes here of the show. I have my script on my computer here. It literally says, question number 8, Mike Pompeo. What the fuck's that all about? That's literally the question, Bill. Where do you fall? I've just never seen somebody so full of himself with so little to show for it. But perhaps I'm just abused. Again, I do hold him in a special ill regard because of the West Point thing, the way he rides the fact that he was number one in his class and all that. And those of us who went there and know that being number one in your class isn't all that you think it is, right? It's good grades, but there's more to it. And sometimes it's not actually a compliment if you're number one in your class, which I'll leave to others to argue. But what's your take? He thinks he might be president. And DeSantis thinks he might be. But Mike Pompeo, what's your take on Mike Pompeo? You're a foreign policy guy. What's your thoughts?
He came to Washington in, I can't remember, 2012, maybe 2010.
I think so, yeah, as a congressman from Kansas.
As a congressman, and he was interested in foreign policy, and I am too. And I got to know him, and I thought he was pretty, he was hawkish, as I am and was.
Yep.
Sometimes a little, overdoing it a tad, but I thought pretty intelligent, pretty sensible. I admired the West Point grad side of him too.
Sure.
I don't know. Of course, none of these things turns out to be a People can be genuine war heroes, some of them, and go bad when they get into politics. And other people can be, not super distinguished, you might say, in their previous life, and then really rise to the occasion in politics. So it turns out to be, I think the reasons people make the decisions they do, their character, it's all much more complicated than looking at some bio and saying, well, this person went here, or this person was first in his class there, and therefore he or she's going to be fine. I mean, it really is striking how hard it is to predict these things some of the time. But for him, I think the ambition was always there. It was very great. And look, it served him well. Now we'll see if how well he does in the presidential race, but he certainly rose high, CIA director and then Secretary of State. This is, for me, was one of the big problems with our friends in Never Trump world, and not a big problem, but a mistake, a misjudgment by our friends in Never Trump world, and mostly, and rather liberals in particular. They had such contempt, correctly, for Trump and Trumpism and all the people who went to work for Trump and sucked up to Trump and got jobs better than they ever could have dreamed of getting. Sarah Sanders is a good example of this for Trump. And they all therefore took the next step and said, and that person's finished. I remember having this conversation so many times in 2016, 17. Sarah Sanders, I mean, she could have been a real mover and shaker in the kind of communications PR world. And now she's defending Trump, making ridiculous charges, once she even had to apologize, but she so obviously made something up. I can't remember what it was exactly from the White House podium. But Jim, of course, talking also, but in so many ways, being really disgraceful, I would say.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, the bad news is, you're right that it is a terrible reflection on their character that they've all chosen to go down this path. The bad news is it's not clear they're going to pay a price.
No.
Sarah Sanders is the governor of Arkansas. Tucker Carlson's making the most money of any person on cable TV. I'm sure it is the most influential person, I suppose, on cable TV. A lot of other people are doing very well, having gone down that path. Some of them went down that path for that reason. Some of them didn't have that much choice. They weren't in that important jobs. They were kind of a chance to make it in an administration where other people weren't going to go in. Some of them just stumbled into it and realized, well, this is a real gravy train. But the lack of accountability, you and I discussed this in this other thing we were at a couple of months ago together.
Funny thing,
it's really been striking for Trump personally, but for everyone else too. Yeah. Who has paid a price for being part of an attempt to subvert a U.S. election on January 6th? A bunch of people who stormed the Capitol. Yeah, true. They did pay a price.
Yep.
But anyone who told them to do it, anyone who organized it, anyone who voted to overturn the elections, not really, not many people, certainly. And that's bad for the country. I mean, the lesson that younger people looking up take from that is, I don't know, it looks like that might be a reasonable thing to be a kind of we mock George Santos.
Yep.
He's a member of Congress, and he hasn't been disciplined yet. Before all the talk about it, I'm not so. Are we confident he's not going to serve out his 2 years? I don't know.
I talk about that a lot. There was a great, Charlie Sykes wrote. I actually wrote Charlie's paragraph because it was great. He says, he talked about the post-shame MAGA movement and the distinctive attractions of virtually any sort of miscreant, charlatan, or snollygoster can shelter beneath its wings. So Santos' choice of new friends is not an accident. I've written, for someone like Santos, the new right's moral universe, as various media tributaries, offer liberation and redemption, where mediocrity and venality can share together under a pugnacious amorality.
That was a nice, I remember that.
Yeah, that's a very Charlie Sykes.
Well done,
it's a very Charlie Sykes paragraph. And but that's it, right? You just nailed it. Exactly what you were just saying, that there is this venality and this amorality does pay. There's just, I hate to say it, there's no way to, I'm begging for 1,000 viewers, but I'm positive that if I was like bashing Biden every day, I'd have 10,000, and there's money to be made in that world. And you're right, George Santos. It was interesting to see Mitt. Did you see the thing with Mitt going after?
Well, that was great. I mean, Mitt's been good.
That's Mitt.
Very good. I mean, I wish he'd do a little more. He sort of does something great, and then he kind of just goes back doing his job, which is okay, understandable.
Yeah.
But, it could be a little more Liz Cheney there, but sort of his refusal to dignified Santos as kind of a member of Congress almost. I thought it was a useful reminder that just because he's there and he hasn't been disciplined yet doesn't mean everyone has to go around slapping him on the back.
Right.
You don't have to insult him particularly. You can just ignore him or disdain him or have a word with him and a stern word and move on, right?
Yeah. Well, I was joking when Biden came in, it was, right, Santos, left. And then right, he just skipped right over him. It's the interesting about that, though, is, today we had our first hearing of the I don't know. I don't know what committee it was. Oversight, I think it was. Jim Jordan, his antics, and everybody else. Comer's committee, and last night I was thinking this last. I actually woke up this morning thinking about it too, with what Biden did during the State of the Union speech, where he kind of led them into their ambush. The House, the GOP seems to think that they'll just be able to get away with. They're going to do these investigations and these press conferences, and they're gonna be able to do whatever they want. They're going to get the story. But what I am seeing, what I love right now, especially under Hakeem Jeffries, it feels like there's been a change in the House, especially. They're going to fight back. If you look at how they stack that committee with incredible AOC's on there and Raskin's on there, and and they've got some real stars on that committee who are going to fight back. One of the first things we learn in the military is, when you talk about strategy, I think it goes all back to Sun Tzu, is the enemy gets a vote. Right. And in the past, it seems like under Mrs. Pelosi, there was sort of a reticence to fight back. But it does feel like this new House, they're going to fight back. I think that, do you feel like maybe that there's going to be a mistake being made? The House GOP is going to go over their skis a bit and fall on their face by this aggressive tactic? Because it's what little I watched of the Twitter hearing today, they came prepared. AOC came prepared. Others came prepared to fight Daniels, I believe, they came in prepared. I mean, is there a chance that we're going to see them fall on their faces because they just forgot that the Dems are going to fight back?
So I think there's a chance of it. I mean, I think Pelosi was in a different situation because they had the majority. Obviously, right. Biden was president, so especially the last few years. So she had all kinds of obligations to get stuff through. She couldn't kind of afford to be doing the performative stuff, and the Republicans just did that in opposition. I do think the fact that the Democrats in the minority in the House gives them a chance to fight back, as you put it, and not they got going to get too much legislation passed beyond the debt ceiling and a couple other things through Kevin McCarthy. They do have to fight back, though. I mean, I think this is your key point. I mean, about it's not the enemy has a vote, and also the enemy wins even if the enemy is incompetent and kind of klutzy and doesn't use its. I defer to you on all this military stuff, but doesn't use its weapons well and has poor tactics and so forth. If the other guys are just sitting there saying, "Boy, look how bad those tactics are," the enemy can still win, right? I mean, you got to actually fight. And I'm a little worried that Democrats in Washington that I've spoken to are so confident that these guys are all clowns that they forget that, as was Charlie Sykes' formulation, they're clowns with flamethrowers. They can do a lot of damage, even if they're clownish, right? Yep. And the Democrats have to be organized and ready to really defend themselves on the one hand, defend Biden, and also call out the other guys. And there are a few doing it. I think on Santos, a couple of members of Congress have made that their little project. Yeah. But I think they should keep that up. I mean, people need to really hammer home, why is this guy in the House? What is Kevin McCarthy doing? He's doing nothing. Right. Is he slow walking it through the ethics committee? Well, how can we? Is there nothing more that can be done by the majority here? I mean, I just feel like there are a lot of issues like that where they really can keep the pressure on. And if it's important to do so.
Well, the right figured out, there's such I look back when you started the Weekly Standard, for example, there was only a few. Tim Miller's book is terrific on this. I was fortunate to host Tim in a book chat here in St. Louis when he came through, and I
didn't know that. It's great.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Did he shock everyone in St. Louis?
They loved him. He's got some huge fans. Well, he's from here.
Choice of language is very delicate.
No, he's from here, dude. He's from St. Louis. He's one of us. And he does a great job of laying out how the media ecosphere, since you started Weekly Standard and others, it was a smaller ecosphere then. Now you've got this giant media ecosphere, echo chamber for them, that in many ways they just have to talk to that, right? I say this a lot with I think of Glenn Youngkin, for example, in Virginia. Glenn was very good at saying one thing to the mainstream media and then saying a completely freaking different thing on Steve Bannon's podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And and one of the reasons he won, I think, is he energized those people with the CRT. He didn't say the CRT bullshit as much on the larger channels, but where he knew his audience was receiving the information, he energized them and they came out. And I think the Democrats in many ways have failed. Now, the Republicans' whole thing is they come in, they say their piece, they leave, they got their clip for Fox, they go on Fox. I'm encouraged and I'm hopeful that our colleagues in the Democratic Party will do the things on their own side, right? That we need to energize our base. There is this constant seeking out independents and Republicans is fine, but in the end, only 50% of Democrats showed up to vote, right? I mean, there's a hunger, and I see this a lot in my current work that I'm doing, which I think I told you a little bit about, is there's a hunger in the Democratic base to fight, right, too. They're tired of taking it in the chin. They're tired of seeing this.
And it's not inconsistent with appealing to moderates and independents and
Right.
people who've been Republicans in the past. I mean, you can be tough and make the case for democracy and be indignant at the Republicans' lies and Trump's lies and the big lie, without embracing every left-wing woke,
Sure.
policy or formulation. So I think you can both be a fighter and be sort of an appeal broadly. And the Democrats, Biden did that pretty well last night. Pretty good model. Maybe they should think more about that. Combine that kind of rhetoric of unity and some genuine, efforts to sort of say, look, on something like that ceiling, that's too important to mess around with. And you guys, Republicans, you passed it when Trump was president, and we need to pass it here to raise it when there's a Democratic president. Same with foreign policy.
Yep.
But then on other things, to really stick it to the Republicans and call them out on their hypocrisy. Well, where are you guys on entitlement? You say you want to balance the budget, you want to hold the debt ceiling hostage. We're the biggest items of the budget or the entitlements. You want to cut Social Security or Medicare? Fine, make a case for it. But no, we don't want to do it. Well, okay, well then that's off the table. So what are we really talking about? And I think Biden showed a little bit of a way to be both pretty effective in a partisan way, but also reach out to moderates and to independents last night.
Yeah, and I see it in the committee, right? I see placing these folks in the committees, placing the fighters on the committees, and then hold them accountable. If Jim Jordan wants to investigate Hunter Biden, great. Then we get to investigate. We get to bring up Jared and Ivanka. The corruption. If we're going to talk about corruption and use of power, association with the presidency, great. Let's talk about that because we had 4 years of it, and there's a reason Jared got $2 billion from the Saudis. I'm eager to see that, and I did see that. I was encouraged today seeing that prosecuted well. Ms. Cortez, AOC, did a great job of prosecuting the case that the one time that the White House literally called Twitter and wanted a tweet removed was when Christy Teigen called Trump a pussy ass bitch. Okay. And that was read that was actually read in the Federal Record today, that tweet, and that is the White House called Twitter and saying, hey, you need to get that tweet, a celebrity's tweet removed because it was mean. I think they did a very good job of coming prepared to prosecute the case against the previous administration as well, if we're going to play this little game. So again, that's where the enemy getting a vote. So I joke a lot on this show that every now and then I'm cautiously optimistic. It's a weird feeling sometimes after the last 6 years, right, to be somewhat optimistic. But I do believe there's fight in them. And the one thing
don't get carried away with it. That's
I think you're just cynical. You think you're just cynical. Too many years in this business. That's what I think.
That's true. That's true.
I don't want to keep you long. I know you got a lot going on. Where people can find you everywhere, Bill? I usually ask that question, but it's I think you're still on. You're very active on Twitter. I love that.
Well, thanks for mentioning the Bulwark. The Bulwark. I'm very proud of what Jonathan Last and all the others have done at the Bulwark. I've been really, honestly, a small player. I've helped out, but it's really, I feel like this awfully good stuff there every morning, and then the newsletters and the podcasts and so forth. And then, on Twitter at Bill Kristol, I try to promote good stuff, and I'll certainly promote this podcast. And even if it's not that good, but you're good, so that's okay. And so, I guess those are the main places you can find me. I mean, Sarah Longwell and I, and she really does the bulk of the work at Defending Democracy together.
Yes,
I think we made a difference in 2022, beating some of the worst election deniers. And one forgets how close some of those races were. A couple of Secretary of State races, the governor's race in Arizona, obviously with Carrie Lake. And again, liberals were all chortling, and I was happy she lost. Believe me, Carrie Lake, she lost. Pathetic. But she lost by 17,000 votes, by less than 1%. The fact that someone as far out there
and vile
came close to winning in a swing state. We're not talking about Arkansas, Oklahoma or something. I mean, that's worrisome. And again, for me, that's why 2022 was a good year. We dodged a bullet. That's what I think of it. But we have a lot of problems out there. We need to a lot of work to do to build a real sane governing majority, at least in one party, and then reach out to some other people in the other party, and hopefully then the other party changes eventually.
Oh, I love it. And you guys are still doing good work. I mean, I'm sure you got big plans for this next cycle as we look at it. One of the things I do talk about a lot is that we're going to have to change the focus. As you know, I think in my work I mentioned to you, we're doing some interesting stuff that I'll hopefully be announced here in the next couple of weeks about trying to it feels like we may be locked into a battle of 51 versus 49 and changing that. Whoever gets the 51, who gets the 49 a few times, if we don't expand the base, expand the fight, right? That's what I love about what I'm hearing. You guys did expand the fight as well. One of the things I enjoyed about your work that you're doing on that side is you've always stayed focused on what the goal is. It's not necessarily the most winnable race. It is these vile people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and others that have to be pushed back against. And that's certainly my obsession is like, we can't, it may not be a winnable race at 30 points, but if we don't fight the fight, then what's the point? So I respect your work, sir. I really do appreciate you.
Well,
I will.
I appreciate what you're saying, and thank you. And it's really been great seeing you remotely here on the screen, and hope to see you again soon here in Washington, or maybe in St. Louis. Or I like St. Louis. One of our daughters went to WashU there, and so we visited. We visited many times, took her out to dinner there, and what's that area near WashU called? There's some
Central West End, or
the West End, but also up there's some cute street. I can't remember what they call it anyway. Whatever.
The Loop, the U City, the Loop, perhaps, or Delmar.
Yeah. So that was
the whole area.
I liked WashU, and I liked St. Louis. Went to a couple of Cardinals games. I think we went. I think her first year maybe was the year they won the World Series with Pujols, and
there you go.
3 or 4 or something like that. So it was fun.
It's a great town. I tell people. People ask me a lot why I moved back to my hometown. Obviously, there was a pretty lady involved, but what's wonderful about St. Louis, I love, and you've seen it too, is and you live in DC, understand there's lots of good stuff to do, but here in St. Louis, it's accessible. Like like if I want Cardinals tickets, I can get Cardinals tickets generally. If I want to go to a symphony tomorrow night, I could probably get tickets to it. It's big enough to have the things that are awesome and small enough that you can actually get into them still, which I love about it.
That is nice.
It's been a joy to be back here in the town, and I appreciate you for saying that. So I will see you in DC, sir. Thanks for joining me today. I can't thank you enough, Bill. Good luck. Keep up the fight.
Thanks, Fred. Be well.
All right. See you soon. Man, another great show with my friend Bill Kristol. I can't believe I get to know these people. I mean, honestly, the last few years of my life, my girlfriend Heather likes to say a lot. She goes, "Man, your life is weird," and I think for those of us, for those of you, and thank you for listening to the show and watching the show. I'm as amazed as you are sometimes at the people I get to talk to, and there are days I'll sit around my house and go, man, I just can't believe I had the opportunity to meet and bash heads with folks like this. People I've followed for almost my entire adult life, like Bill Kristol. So thank you for joining the show for these reasons. As I always want to remind you that you can find me at FP Wellman on Twitter. I'm still there, still causing trouble. I am on Instagram. I'd love you to follow me there. FP Wellman Official is my public one. I'm even on that post.news, and somebody talked me into joining Spoutable, FP Wellman, all those places. Here, of course, the show is available on the On Democracy Pod on YouTube, and then we have our own Twitter handle on the On Democracy podcast there. So please follow us there. Really would appreciate actually subscribing. If you're getting this, if you're seeing a clip of us, I'd love you to subscribe and share. As always, we're sponsored here we're here in the Half Coast Studios, which is our sponsor with Vi Media. Vi Media is your marketing partner for your digital marketing partner for everything you possibly need. They are a growing company. They just won another award the other day because they're doing so well. They are based right here in St. Louis, but they have a national footprint. They're your partner that generates proven growth in a variety of different industries, and they've been good friends to us nationwide too. So they can serve all your digital marketing needs. As I said, please give them a call. You'll find them on the internet at vie.media. That's VIE.media. And with all that, thank you. What a great show. Next week will be another good one. I thank you enough for joining us, and share, like, subscribe so Matt won't punch me. Okay, he doesn't punch me. He's a nice guy. With that, have a great day. We'll see you next week.